So now let's work with this sign up button. I will hide the bottom panel and I will scroll down to the sign up button. Oh, no, let's keep it. Okay, for the sign up button, I have also created a little code so that I don't have to type much. And the very first step for us will be to make sure that the required fields in this user registration form are not empty, that the email address and password and first name are not empty. And this is what our first few lines of code do. We validate required fields and make sure that they're not empty. And each line of this statement is checking that, for example, first name text field, this is the text field, and we have a connection with this text field here. So we are referencing the text field, and then we, by typing dot and then text, we are reading the text from this text field, and we are checking if it's empty. And if it is empty, we will immediately go here and display alert message and return. We do not want to continue if one of this statement is empty. So, and this two vertical lines, this is logical OR. So we say if first name is empty, or last name is empty, or email address is empty, or password is empty, we want to return, but letting user know there will be an alert dialog. Please make sure that all the required fields are filled in. Okay, so the next step for us will be assume that all the required fields are filled in. We want to make sure that the password match. We have password and then we ask user to repeat their password. So we want to make sure that the password field matches the repeat password field. Okay, so this is what these lines of code do. We refer the password text field, we read the text from this field, and then we call a function elements equal, this is built-in Swift function, and we pass in the value from the repeat text, repeat password text field. And if these values are not equal, we will also return. This is a comment where we want to display, here's the code that needs to display alert message, and we will display alert message and return. And I have actually prepared a little function to display alert message. Let me copy that function and paste it at the very bottom. So this is our sign in button tapped. I'll paste the function that displays the message, and this is an example of how we display UI alert controller and alert dialog box. So we are instantiating alert controller and we are giving it a title and a message, user message, which we receive as an argument to this function, and then we create OK button. This is action button that user needs to tap, and once user tap on this action button, we will print out to the console OK button tap, and this is how we add the OK action button to the alert controller itself, and this is how we are presenting this alert controller. So we are creating alert controller, the dialog message, and we are presenting alert controller. The created UI alert controller is stored in this alert controller constant, and we use that constant as a parameter to this present function. Okay, so we can then use this function display message in one of the places here. So we will display message, and because this is user message, we can type a message here. For example, all fields are required to fill in. Okay, and here we will also paste, but the message will be different. We'll type something like, please make sure that passwords match, something like this. Okay, So let's continue. So we made sure that all required fields are there. We made sure that password fields are matching. So the next step for us is to send HTTP request, and that HTTP request can take some time. If connection is good, then it will be very quick that the mobile application will receive response. But if connection is slow, it might take 1 or 2 or 3 seconds for user to receive response. And it is a good practice to display activity indicator, something circling in the middle of the screen, letting user know that an action is in progress, please wait. And this is what we will do. We will create an activity indicator, and I have plenty of examples on my Swift developer blog, and I have an example of how to create UIActivityIndicator programmatically, and also using Xcode user interface. And in this example, I just copied and paste this code that I have here. So let me copy the way I create activity indicator, and I will paste it here. So we're creating activity indicator with the style gray, and then we will position this activity indicator at the center of the view, and we are positioning at the center of the view. And when activity indicator stops circling, it will hide automatically. This is we are instructing it with this line, hides when stopped. And eventually, just before sending the HTTP request, we need to start this activity, start animating, so that circle will start circling, start spinning. And finally, because activity indicator is a view, and we are presenting it on a different view, which a page is also a view, we need to add this activity indicator as a sub view. So activity indicator will be displayed on top of our page at the center of the view. So we need to add it as a sub view. So now activity indicator will start circling, and we are ready to send HTTP request. And as soon as we receive response from that HTTP request, we will stop activity indicator and remove it from the sub view. Okay, and now we are ready to send HTTP request. So I'm going to, I have also prepared a few lines of code, and the very first one is to compose the URL. I'm sending HTTP request to an Apache web server, Tomcat servlet container that runs on my local host on port 8080, and I have an API, RESTful Web Services API created. This is the API endpoint, and you can find the source code at my apps developer blog. Here's an example: RESTful Web Service to save a new user in database, and it has all the code you need: how to create a project using Maven, how to create a RESTful Web Service, how to accept HTTP request, and how to convert JSON Payload into a Java class, and eventually how to store it into a MySQL database, and so on. So you can use this example, or you can create your own web service. Maybe you're using PHP. And by the way, on my Swift developer blog, I have, if you search for PHP examples, I have examples of how to how to store user information in the MySQL database with PHP as well. So just search, here's the keywords, or you can find video using the search button. Anyway, so we are creating a URL to our web service endpoint, or to a PHP script that accepts this HTTP request, and then we are converting that URL into a request, URL request, and then we're populating some of the fields that are very important. We are populating HTTP method. We're instructing that this is going to be HTTP post rather than HTTP get, and a couple of header fields that my web service requires, and this is content type. We are going to my web service will accept JSON payload, and application JSON is the content type of the of what we can accept. Okay, so finally we are posting the parameters. So that will be a post string, and these are going to be the parameters that we're sending to our web service as a JSON payload. This will eventually be converted into a JSON string. So we're sending first name, and we are reading it from first name text field. Last name is the name of the parameter or the key value of the key in the JSON document, and that will be the value. Last name text field, read text field, and password is highlighted. I think the field user password is different, so let me paste it here, user password. Okay, so that will be the JSON payload in our HTTP body, and this is how we convert this into a JSON payload. So we are using JSON serialization, and we're giving it this post string, and we're converting that into a JSON and setting as a content of HTTP body. And if something goes wrong, we will print out an error, or we can also display a message here and also return. For example, if something goes wrong, we'll print out into a console an error message, and then here something went wrong, try again. But this is an error which user can not probably fix. Okay, and then we are returning, since we were not able to create a proper JSON payload, then most probably user will not be able to create an account because server-side script might fail. Okay, so let's continue, and finally we are ready to send HTTP request. So HTTP request is sent using this piece of code. So we're creating a task, a resumable task, and it will end with the task resume. Okay, and inside of this it's a plenty of code that needs to go. So I've also prepared it, so I don't have to type. So first of all, as soon as we receive information from the server side, we are ready to hide activity indicator, and I have created a separate function which I called a removed activity indicator, and I pass as a parameter to that function the activity indicator that we have created here, my activity indicator. And let me copy and paste the function itself. So the function itself, I will paste it right above the display message here. Okay, this is the function. So the remove activity indicator, what it does, it receives activity indicator we have created as an argument, and then in the main queue, because HTTP request, this tasks will span an asynchronous task, and for us to be able to communicate with the user interface from that background task, we will need to call it from inside the main asynchronous task. Okay, so we are stopping the activity indicator, and we are removing this activity indicator from the view. Okay, so let's go back to our task and continue. So if an error takes place, we will display an error message and we will return. And then once we receive a response, it will be inside of this data object. So we will need to parse the data object. We will need to convert it into a dictionary, and the way we do that is by doing this. Let me copy this piece of code and paste it here. By the way, the source code that I'm pasting everything will be available on my Swift developer blog, so you can just go and copy it from there. Okay, so we have received, this is the task, and when this task completes, the data object will contain the data that we have received from the server side, and if an error takes place, an error object will be created and it will contain an error. So this is why we're checking if error took place. If it's not nil, then we can display that a friendly error message, and for our own use we can print out the content of that error message into Xcode console. Okay, and now we're converting the response sent from the server side into a dictionary here by using JSON Serialization, where it takes data as a parameter, and we will get back a JSON object which will be a dictionary. And now we will unwrap that dictionary. Basically, we're checking if this dictionary has data, and that data will be stored into Parse JSON object now. Then we go inside of this curly brackets and this code will run. So if it's not empty, then we can access some of the details that we have received from the server side. And I know that I'm sending user ID, and it will be stored in user ID value. This is how I read data from the dictionary, and I store it into user ID and I can print it out. Okay, and if user ID is empty, then I want to display a message that we could not perform this request successfully. But if everything is okay, if user ID is not empty, then I want to display a message that successfully registered a new user account, everything went okay. Okay, and this is basically it. So this is how we send HTTP request, and this HTTP request before it was sent, we'll create activity indicator, and as soon as we receive response from HTTP request, we will remove this activity indicator from the view. And also, if an error message takes place, we will also remove activity indicator from the view and then display alert message. And because I'm calling display message and remove activity indicator multiple times in my Swift code, I have created these functions so I can reuse that code. Okay, so let's just try and run this application, and hopefully it will work. So I'll play it now. Okay, application started. I'll just go to register, open left side panel, go to my register view controller, close this one, and I will set a few breakpoints to see the logic. So I'll set a breakpoint here. So if one of the fields is empty, this message will be displayed. If password do not match, this message will be displayed. And then I will set a breakpoint here just before sending HTTP request, and then inside as soon as I receive HTTP request. And then I will also set a breakpoint here to look at the JSON like inside of it. And if error takes place here, I'll also set breakpoint so that I see it. Okay, breakpoints are set. I'm going back to my simulator and I click on register new account, and then register new account is presented, and I click on sign up button right away. Okay, and because I did not fill any information, this breakpoint is triggered because all of them are empty, but it will be triggered even if one of them is empty. So that works well. We're displaying an alert message. All fields are required to fill in. Okay, and we are dismissing the view controller. So I call back the register view controller again. So now let me fill in the fields. Let's do Sergey Kargapolov, and email address will be test@test.com, and the password will be 123. This is going to my local host, into MySQL on my local host. So I click on sign up button. So validation went through fine. We have a post string that holds 4 values here, so that's all good. And then we're sending HTTP request. Now let's play it. Okay, we have received data. You see that activity indicator spinning, and after this line is executed, this activity indicator will disappear. So we will play it one by line. So error did not, we have an error object, and this is why we are exiting and a message will be displayed. So let's play it and look at the error message. Could not successfully perform this request, please try again later. And we'll look at the error message. Yes, the resource could not be loaded because of the app transport security policy. This is because we are not sending this request over HTTPS. Okay, so we can disable that. I'll stop this application, I'll go to my project, and under the project, here under the project folder, we have this info plist file. We can open it as a source code, and then inside of it, right at the bottom, just before this dictionary XML element closes, we will paste a new dictionary that has a key NS app transport security, and then it will have another key allows arbitrary loads. So this one will allow us to send this HTTP request over HTTP. But when your application is ready to go to production, do not do that. Make sure that you always send HTTP request over a secure SSL connection. But this one should let us send this insecure connection to our local host over HTTP. So let's play this example now and see if it helped us. Okay, so we click on register and try again. So I will type my name. Family name, and then test@test.com 123, and then 123, sign up. Okay, so we're removing and we're just playing one by line, so there is no error now, which is good. We have a response from server, and we just go in. The JSON is not empty. We have 4 values and we can unwrap them. And this is what we have received from server. We have user ID generated, a public secure user ID that we can pass around the network. And we go in, user ID is not empty, and we are displaying successfully registered a new account message. Display, and here we go. So we can now use test@test.com with 123 password to sign in. But of course, we didn't work with this sign in page yet. So this is what we will do next in the next video.